They called me a failure for dropping out, so I hired them as my assistants. When my eldest son, Bryce, looked at me across the dinner table, his face a mask of cold disappointment, and said, "Let's be honest, Dad. You're a college dropout with no ambition. You'll never be more than a handyman, and we're tired of being embarrassed by you." I simply nodded and said, "I understand how you feel." By the next morning, I had liquidated a single investment account and purchased the commercial building that housed their struggling architecture firm. And that was just the beginning. For 25 years, I had worked my calloused hands to the bone to give my 3 sons a life of opportunity. I paid for their prestigious degrees, their luxury apartments, and their extravagant weddings, all while living in my modest workshop home, content with my simple life as a craftsman. I believed their success was my greatest achievement. They thought they were dealing with a simple, uneducated father they had long outgrown. They saw a man who fixed things for a living, a hobbyist who didn't understand their world of corner offices and corporate lingo. They were about to learn that the handyman they mocked was the silent majority shareholder of the very tech empire whose software they used every day, a man whose private investments could buy their firm 10 times over. Justice must be restored and arrogance punished. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Samuel Briggs. My story isn't one of a failed education, but a redirected path. I dropped out of MIT not because I couldn't handle the work, but because I saw a spark in the early days of the internet. A spark my professors called a fad. I left with a revolutionary algorithm for data compression, idea I built in my dorm room. While my classmates were finishing their finals, I was founding Nexus Logic. I poured my youth into that company, and it rewarded me beyond my wildest dreams. By 35, I was a multi-millionaire, but I was also burned out, divorced, and disconnected from my 3 young sons. I made a choice. I sold my majority stake for a life-changing sum, ensuring my boys' futures were secure, and I walked away. I moved back to my hometown, bought a small property with a large workshop, and rediscovered the joy of working with my hands. To my sons, Bryce, Liam, and Carter, I was just Dad, the guy who could fix a broken cabinet and who had a small nest egg from a tech sale long ago. They never asked for details. They were too busy enjoying the fruits of my labor. I funded their every whim. Bryce wanted a degree from an Ivy League school? Done. Liam needed a new car after he wrecked his? I wrote the check. Carter's destination wedding in Bali? I covered it all without a second thought. I attended their graduations, beaming with pride. My own MIT dropout story a faded, slightly embarrassing footnote they never mentioned. The shift was gradual. As their careers took off, particularly Bryce and Liam's architecture firm, Knight and Briggs, their visits became less frequent. Their comments became more pointed. They'd look around my workshop, filled with half-restored classic cars and custom furniture projects, and sigh, "Dad, you should really sell this place. It's too much for you," Liam would say, his voice dripping with false concern. "All this potential, wasted on fixing old junk," Bryce would add, running a finger over a dusty workbench. "We could get you a nice condo. Something more appropriate." I dismissed it as stress from their new business. I was just happy they were successful. I was their biggest cheerleader, even as they started to see me as their biggest embarrassment. The betrayal happened on my 65th birthday. They had actually planned a dinner at an upscale steakhouse, a gesture that filled me with a foolish hope. I wore my best jacket, the one I save for weddings, and arrived with a heart full of pride for the men they had become. The dinner started pleasantly enough, but the tone shifted when the dessert menu arrived. Bryce cleared his throat, adopting the serious tone he used for business meetings. "Dad, we need to talk about your future," he began. "We've been discussing it, and we're concerned. You're not getting any younger, and that workshop isn't a real home. It's a liability." Liam chimed in. "We found a fantastic retirement community. It has organized activities, healthcare on-site. It's what you need." I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at Carter, my youngest, who stared intently at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. "I appreciate your concern, boys," I said slowly, "but my workshop is my home. I'm happy there. I'm not ready for a community." Bryce's face hardened. "That's the problem, Dad. You're not living in reality. You've never had any ambition. You dropped out of college and settled for a life of tinkering. The words hit me like a physical blow. I settled. I built a life I love. I provided for you. Provided? Bryce cut me off, his voice rising enough that other diners glanced over. You gave us handouts, not a legacy. We built our own success despite your example, not because of it. That's when he said the words that would echo in my mind for weeks. Let's be honest, Dad. You're a college dropout with no ambition. You'll never be more than a handyman, and we're tired of being embarrassed by you. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at my 3 sons, the center of my universe, and saw 3 strangers who saw me as a stain on their polished image. I felt a cold calm wash over me. The heat of humiliation was instantly replaced by the ice of clarity. I nodded. I understand how you feel, I said, my voice eerily steady. I paid the bill, a force of habit, and walked out, leaving them sitting there. The perfect family illusion was shattered forever. Back in the sanctuary of my workshop, surrounded by the scent of sawdust and engine oil, I did not weep. I planned. They had declared war on the man who funded their lives, and they were too arrogant to know they were already bankrupt. I went to my old, rusted tool cabinet, the one they had mocked for years. Behind a false back panel, I kept a fireproof lockbox. Inside was a slim, encrypted laptop. With a few keystrokes, I accessed a world they didn't know existed, a network of investment accounts, holding companies, and blind trusts. For the next week, I became a ghost in their professional lives. I used my old contacts, the ones from my Nexus Logic days, to quietly investigate Knight and Briggs. The picture that emerged was bleak. Their firm was drowning. They had overextended on a flagship project, their credit lines were maxed out, and they were days from missing payroll. Their sleek downtown office. They were 3 months behind on rent. Their entire performance at the dinner, the condescension, the push for me to move into a cheap retirement home, was a desperate gambit. They weren't just trying to hide me away out of embarrassment. They were planning to liquidate my property and my assets to bail out their failing business. The depth of the deception was staggering. They saw me not as their father, but as their last remaining asset. A piggy bank to be smashed open when their own ambition crashed. What they didn't know was that the handyman they dismissed was a master of systems and structure, both in wood and in finance. I had spent 2 decades building a fortune with the same patience I applied to restoring a vintage Mustang. My plan was simple, elegant, and devastating. First, I reached out to the holding company that owned their office building. I made an offer, in cash, for the entire property. The offer was too good to refuse, and it was processed with a speed that only significant capital can command. I was now their landlord. Second, I had my lawyer, a sharp woman named Amanda Walsh who had handled my affairs since the Nexus sale, establish a new corporate entity, Briggs Holdings. We became a silent, anonymous client that approached Knight and Briggs with a proposition, a complex, lucrative project designing a series of high-concept, artisan workshops. The fee we offered was a lifeline, exactly what they needed to cover their immediate debts. The catch was the demanding timeline and the need for dedicated, on-call assistance from their senior team to manage the client's eccentric requests. Third, I began methodically pulling the financial support I had always provided. The automatic transfers to their personal accounts stopped. The credit cards I co-signed for were canceled. The safety net they had taken for granted their entire adult lives vanished in an instant. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now, I just had to wait for the cage door to slam shut. The first tremors hit quickly. Bryce called me a week later, his voice strained. Dad, my card was declined at the country club. What's going on? I'm just reorganizing my finances, son, I said calmly. I'm sure you of all people can understand fiscal responsibility. He sputtered, but hung up. Liam called next, panicked about his mortgage payment. I gave him the same response. The confusion in their voices was a quiet symphony. Then, the real crisis hit them. They received a formal notice from their new landlord, me, through my LLC, that their lease was being terminated in 60 days due to the sale of the building. They could reapply for a new lease at triple the current rate. Simultaneously, the Savior Project from Briggs Holdings kicked in. The demands started flowing in. Requests for endless revisions, meetings at odd hours, and detailed breakdowns of the most mundane design choices. They were running in circles, burning through their remaining resources to please a client who seemed impossible to satisfy. all while facing financial ruin at home and professional eviction at work. The pressure was immense. The arrogance began to crack, replaced by a desperate fear they couldn't hide. The climax arrived at the project review meeting. I instructed Amanda to summon the senior partners of Knight and Briggs to the offices of Briggs Holdings for a critical presentation. They arrived at a sleek, high-floor office I had rented for the day, looking haggard and stressed. They were led into a conference room with a stunning city view. Bryce, Liam, and even a reluctant Carter stood nervously at the head of the table, preparing their pitch. Then I walked in. I was not wearing my work coveralls. I was in a tailored Tom Ford suit, a watch on my wrist worth more than their company's annual revenue. The shock in the room was palpable. Bryce's mouth actually fell open. Liam dropped his tablet. "Dad? What are you doing here?" Bryce stammered. I took a seat at the head of the table, steepling my fingers. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice calm and commanding. "You can address me as Mr. Briggs. I am the principal of Briggs Holdings, and I am your new landlord." The color drained from their faces. It was a beautiful, terrifying sight. "I've reviewed your work on my projects so far," I continued, tapping the thick file of their frantic, disjointed work. "It's disappointing. Frankly, it lacks vision and discipline. It's the kind of work I'd expect from a firm on the verge of collapse, desperately chasing a payday." I let the silence hang, allowing the humiliation to sink in. "You told me I was a failure, an embarrassment. You saw this." I gestured to my suit, to the room. "And you still only see a handyman playing dress-up. You never stop to wonder where your tuition, your cars, your weddings actually came from. You were so obsessed with your own credentials, you failed to see the genius right in front of you." I laid out the new reality for them. Their firm was finished. Their credit was ruined. Their reputations were about to be shredded when it got out that they had tried to manipulate their own father into funding their failure. But I offered them a choice, a single, narrow path. "I am dissolving Knight and Briggs," I said. "However, I am starting a new venture, a high-end, bespoke furniture and design company that values true craftsmanship. I need assistance. The work will be hands-on. You'll be learning from the ground up, sanding, staining, following blueprints. The salaries will be modest, but fair. You will earn your keep, without my name, my money, or my past success to lean on." It was a take-it-or-leave-it offer. Reject it, and face total, public bankruptcy. Accept it, and face a humbling that would redefine their entire understanding of success and failure. With no other options, they signed the employment contracts I placed in front of them. Later that evening, Bryce came to my workshop. The arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by a shattered man. "Why, Dad?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Why humiliate us like that? Why not just help us?" "Because you needed to learn," I said, not unkindly. "You confused wealth with worth, and credentials with character. A man is not defined by his degrees or his job title, but by his integrity. You had none. You were willing to destroy your own father for a business loan. I had to teach you that lesson before the world taught it to you in a much crueler way." He had no response. The truth was a mirror, and he could no longer avoid his reflection. Today, Briggs & Sons Artisan Works is a thriving business. My sons, Bryce, Liam, and Carter, work for me. They start their days early, their hands are often dirty, and they have a newfound respect for the craft they once mocked. The humiliation has been replaced by a grudging, then a genuine admiration. We are rebuilding, not just furniture, but our relationship, on a foundation of hard work and mutual respect, not entitlement and deceit. The fancy sports cars are gone, the country club memberships canceled. But for the first time, they are building something real with their own hands, and they are finally, truly, my sons. The greatest revenge is not destruction, it is redemption on your own terms. And sometimes, the best way to teach a lesson is to give someone a job. If you believe in second chances and the power of humble pie, hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments. Was I too harsh, or was it the justice they deserved?
If this story got you thinking, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that hit deep, and tap the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And hey, if you know someone who needs to hear this one, share it with them. Thanks for watching.